Today we're looking at dealing with heartbreak, like we call it in today's parlance, breakfast. A lot of people react differently to, this condition of being served breakfast. Everybody talks about it, but nobody talks about how to get through it. And then I know that, in the recently, the woke generation says things about you need to get healing and move on and all that, but nobody actually talks about what it takes to get that healing, or deal with the situation that broke your heart and move on from it. All right, so please just go ahead and tell us how to do this.
Okay, so a couple of things, but before we get into those things, I think it's important to we don't want to assume that everybody appreciates the depth of what a heartbreak does to them. So I'll just run through very quickly what a heartbreak means in a nutshell. There are many ways you can look at a heartbreak, but basically a heartbreak speaks of an overwhelming emotional distress that happens inside people when the relationships don't work out for a couple of reasons, and it's one of the most painful things that can happen to anybody. Personally, I have a theory that I don't think any human being should have more than 3 heartbreaks in their lifetime. 3 is even a lot, but let's just say from growing up to when you finally settle in the marriage, and then hopefully the marriage works out. So let's just say 3. A heartbreak. So as I said, it's an overwhelming emotional distress, and as you would know from your interactions with people, people don't move on the same way. In fact, the reality is that some people are never really able to move on. They just keep going in circles till their time here on earth is over. So I just want to run through, before I begin to give practical tips on how people can deal with the heartbreak better. Just for the sake of enlightening the general public, I want to run through a couple of factors why it seems that some people are never really able to move on from a heartbreak. So I hope I'm still clear.
Yeah.
Very well.
Okay. So there are, for some reason, our love relationships are a major part of our fulfillment as human beings. It's one of those areas where, as they say on the streets, your life will never really be balanced in a way till you find love and you begin to do life with the right person. There are 6 major factors for fulfillment in human beings according to research, and I'll just run through them very quickly. The first one is security. The second one is variety. The third one is significance. That means what you're about, what is the meaning of your life, and all of that. The fourth one is growth. The fifth one is achievement. And the sixth one is love and acceptance. Out of these 6 factors that I have mentioned, whenever a heartbreak happens, at least 4 of these factors are tampered with. There are a lot of people that tie, so you begin to see why it's difficult for people to move on. A study was done one time, and they found out that the average time to move on from a heartbreak, the average time it takes a normal person to, well, sorry, not normal, but tied their entire significance and security and acceptance to one person. You see that it's not very easy to move on. A lot of people unfortunately have a low self-esteem. They basically can't live without the endorsement of one person. So when that person leaves or when that relationship doesn't work out, it can be a very, very Herculean task to move on. Because in my interactions, I find that a lot of people don't really appreciate the depth of what a heartbreak does to them. Some people deceive themselves after a month. They say they are in another relationship, but they are not really in another relationship. Maybe they just want to rebound and look for what they will create more problems for, and it usually doesn't end well. So if somebody has tied their significance, security, achievement, acceptance to one person, it's not very easy to move on. So one of the practical tips I would give to move on after a heartbreak is to reassess your whole life again. Let's not pretend about it. A heartbreak is a very, very... Another practical way to move on after a heartbreak, this is tough, but I find that a lot of people, unfortunately, are in denial. And if you look at the defense mechanisms, sorry, I hope it's not too technical for us, which basically means how people cope with stress and difficult situations. One of the defense mechanisms that human beings use is denial. You just keep, even when you see the signs, you just keep telling yourself, something will happen, it's not me, it's them, it's not me. And a lot of people are in denial. And the longer a person stays in denial, the more difficult it is for them to move on. Because anybody in denial will never be able to reassess, ask themselves tough questions. Okay, this might come as a surprise, but there are many people that are afraid of asking themselves some real tough questions. They're never really in a sober place. They just keep papering the cracks till everything crumbles. But at some point in our lives, and I want to go back to the earlier point I made, that a heartbreak is not a normal thing. No human being should have, in the context of a love relationship, no human being should have more than 3 heartbreaks. Everybody should come into a relationship whole. Maybe that's another conversation for another time. Everybody comes into a relationship whole, and then the other person begins to complement. But when this sense of identity that I'm speaking about is skewed to one person, you are not whole. So it's just like a parasite. You're not even really contributing to that relationship. You are just living off the other person emotionally. So that's a very, very serious issue in the soul that I want people to be aware of. Some people have no business going into a relationship till they have found themselves, till they understand. So you even know what you want, and then you don't just settle for anybody, because at the root of some of these issues is people not knowing what they want. The values are not aligned. The temperaments are not aligned. The personalities are not aligned. I don't mean you have to be the same personality in a relationship, but there should be some shared common values that brings us together. Obviously, not just sex. That's another problem. If all you do in a relationship is just sleeping together, you don't really have time to look into all these things critically. But in a nutshell, what it means to tie your significance to somebody is to derive your identity and your existence from that person. And the reason this is dangerous is because if that person, another time I'm sure we'll be able to talk about manipulation and control. If you're in a relationship with a very, very manipulative person and you tie your existence to that person, you are just setting up yourself for a lot of manipulation. And we hear one of those stories. So I hope it's clearer.
Yes, it is.
Now,
it is.
I don't know if you still want me. Okay.
Now,
and then the second question
good.
about the time. Yeah, so if you invest, say 5 years, there's really nothing you can do about that. As they say, we can't go back to wind the clock. But you can learn, especially when the reasons for that breakup, especially when you were not the reason for the breakup or the heartbreak. As I alluded earlier, some people just behave crazy and you can't keep beating yourself. But what I know and what I have found from my practice and my experience, that is why it is good for a person to have a very, very strong sense of purpose and identity that is not entirely connected to the person that they are in the love relationship with. So that when that relationship doesn't work, you've invested time. So we said that heartbreak is an overwhelming sense of emotional distress. There are many ways you can describe that feeling, but that is actually what is happening to the person or to both parties internally. Then we can now begin to dissect. We can now begin to dissect the issues. So because it's an overwhelming sense of distress, you go through the pain because denial will not solve the problem. You're just postponing the evil day. Forming macho will not solve the problem. You are just going to malfunction in subsequent days and months and years, maybe in another relationship for someone that is not discerning enough to be with you. So when that happens, you can't do anything about the time, but you can do something about repeating that scenario with another person. And that's why I began to say that no human being should have more than 3 heartbreaks in their lifetime.
All right.
Normally, I know there are exceptions, but normally when you take time to reassess all of these things, you won't keep making those mistakes. I hope that speaks to the question.
Thank you so much. We're out of time, right? I'm hoping that by next week, Thursday, when we return to this conversation, we're going to be able to differentiate, because, you know, it was going to be my next question, but of course, like I said, there's no time. So maybe you will have time to ponder on it before we return next week. And that is, how to differentiate what you're feeling at the time. You know, when somebody is attaching their lives or their what's the word you use, their significance to another individual.
Yes.
At that point, they call it butterflies in their stomach, and you know, I cannot do without you. You are the air that I breathe, and they term it love at the time. So we might want to be able to differentiate what this really is when you're in love with somebody, what love is and what it means to actually be giving up your own individuality as a person as against finding love. But by the way, thank you so much for doing justice to the conversation that we had this morning. It was pretty enlightening, and we appreciate your time.